Hi there and welcome to this template shred lesson on developing feel on the electric guitar. This is going to be a little bit of an ambiguous video in the sense of the way that I have to describe things because it's a really odd thing to describe. Bend it to that point that makes it juicy. It's not a very simple thing to describe. In terms of this lesson, we're in an E standard tuning and I'm on a 22 fret guitar. Let's go over some bending fundamentals. When it comes to bending notes, it's a really great thing to know what note you're actually trying to hit. There's nothing worse than hearing a guitar player at a venue bend a note and it's kind of like halfway there, you know? It's like bending out of tune is just the worst thing ever. And then another really horrible trope about guitar players is vibrato, but that's for later in the lesson. So when it comes to bending, what I like to do and what you can try immediately with me right now is to target a note in your scale. And for the scale that we're using today, it's going to be the G major scale at first here. So what I'm going to do is play a note and then bend the note or slash interval behind it up to the note. Here's what that sounds like. So that's a really awful exercise in the sense of it's quite a lot of tension that you're experimenting with and that you're messing with here. What this does though is it pushes you to really acclimate to the guitar that you're playing, which makes you really confident on the guitar that you're playing. So whether you're borrowing your buddy's guitar to track that one solo and it just happens to feel better, check and ask yourself, how long is the physical string from the bridge, let's say, all the way up to the tuning peg here, right? Because that makes a difference. Is there a locking nut? Is that why it's so easy to play the bends? Is it in a completely different tuning? You know, all these parameters apply. Not even talking about action as well as string gauge, that's a completely different thing. So what you might notice is if you've got a headstock like mine, the high E string is actually pretty tough. And the D string is actually pretty tough because it's the first wound string that's also quite long. And so your fingers might be a little bit achy afterwards. I know that my fingers don't really love that exercise, but it's a really great knowing and knowledge of the guitar. Now I'm pretty confident with my bending on this guitar and it's a great exercise to utilize. We're going to do one more scale now. It's the A harmonic minor scale just because there's a huge two-note jump in that scale. So that was challenging. As you could see, I repeated myself there. I thought I was gonna need to bend a little more, but I overbent it. So that's why this is such a good exercise, because now I know the tension and I can understand the tension underneath my fingers and how far I just need to push. One thing that you might have noticed is that I'm actually vibratoing once I hit the pitch, because I think that that's the best way to do vibrato. As soon as you hit the pitch, you establish that you are in tune with the key, with the song, with the solo, whatever it might be, and then you can wobble it and get a little bit of that nice, beautiful harmonic overtone that people keep talking about, right? So when you turn up an amplifier, let's say, and there's a little bit of extra frequencies happening and your pickups are screaming and you've got enough gain. Now, if you don't have enough gain, and if you're playing on a single coil or a clean sound, it's really good to also practice that vibrato. Nervous vibrato is like the worst thing, right? Like, no one wants to hear this kind of ugh, looks like you're choking your damn guitar. Leave it alone, let it sustain, and understand that there's a few different ways to do a vibrato. You can do a vertical one that's like very traditional, that's this kind of up and down motion, or you can do what I call the horizontal vibrato, or like a violin style vibrato. That kind of vibrato allows you to play a chord and from there basically to just do this kind of whole vibrato so that the whole chord gets vibrato. It's really, really nice. Here's some differences for you. Now on a clean tone especially, that's going to show up a lot because you're kind of varying how much you're squeezing the string as well as moving up and down the fret, as it were, and that makes it really, really sweet. Some of the jazz improvisation that I've done in my past heavily relied upon this kind of chordal vibrato, as I like to call it, as well as horizontal vibrato, and it works really well to add just a little bit of subtlety. Regular vertical vibrato is great as well, and I do recommend that you practice it with a metronome, because when you get that down in terms of the tension of the string and in terms of how quick you need to vibrato, you develop a lot of class to your playing, and it's a really, really lovely thing. So here's a little improvisation for you to see how all these things can kind of come together. There's a lot of fun and tasty kind of things in there. It's got a lot of good melody in it. It's sweet. And the thing is that I'm taking my time. I'm not trying to fill the whole space up with notes. And so one final little tidbit for you before the end of this lesson is whenever you're practicing some improvisation, let's say you're just practicing to a backing track, one thing that you might want to try, and I mean, don't overdo this, of course, but you can try to hold your breath a little bit. Because if you try to treat your guitar like as if you were a horn player, for example, your lines are going to be a little different, right? You're trying to mimic how it would be if you only had so much time to fill so many notes before you had to stop, or you had to sit and rest on a note and make some tension. So the beautiful thing about bends and playing throughout this kind of beautiful melodic way of phrasing your guitar playing is to take your time and to let the note bleed into the next bar a little bit. You don't always have to land on 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. You can go 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. You know, you can go through the whole process. So along with all of this kind of improvisation, it's really, really important to remember to take that time and make the space for other musicians as well. This kind of exercise is not very, very simple because of the ambiguity and the nature of the melodies that I don't know that you're playing, but you know what you're playing, and you always know when things sound incorrect. Finally, what I'd like to throw as a little tidbit for you is something that I like to call targeting that I learned many, many years ago. Actually, I don't only like to call it targeting, many people call it targeting. It's where you play a note and then you slide into it from right before it. Very, very simple thing to do. Here's an example of that with all the other things that we've been practicing in this lesson. So did you see how that kind of flowed? It had a little bit of a slur to it almost, right? It's an interesting way to approach being very vocal I really care about being vocal when it comes to my melodic phrasing. So thank you for joining me for this developing your feel kind of lesson here. I've been Paul Oz. Thank you for joining me. Cheers.